Hi, my name is David Frye, and I started a group here in Vermont called People with Disabilities that are GLBTQ. I started this work eight years ago. I went to a national conference for people with disabilities, and I went to a workshop for people with disabilities on relationships. Well, this workshop really said not much about people with disabilities that are GLBTQ. So as I was flying back from Minnesota to Vermont, I thought in my head, this really needs to be addressed. And so I started it back 8 years ago, and I went to my local Pride Center in Vermont, and I called the center and told them my idea, and they said, wow, this has never been introduced, and if you'd like to start a group for people with disabilities that are GLBTQ, you're more than welcome to do that. So with the help of the Vermont Pride Center, they helped me get this going every week. And so we have our groups every single Wednesday from 4:30 to 5:30, and we talk about various topics like having a disability and coming out. We talk about having a disability, being trans. We talk about just having a disability and what it's like living in our lives every single day, having a disability and being GLBTQ. And I've always thought, you know, having a disability, being GLBTQ, that's two whammies that we have every single day in our lives. And it's to just have awareness out there that this is important for people with disabilities that are GLBTQ. And from doing this kind of work, and I feel so strongly about it in the state of Vermont, because Vermont's come a long ways from being more accepting for people with, that are GLBTQ with equal marriage, and just for people being GLBTQ, that our state of Vermont has gone so far. So by adding more to this with people with disabilities, I just think it's another wow, you know, for our state. And so by doing this work, I want to have more recognition, not just in the state of Vermont, but nationally. So I have a small video on YouTube called The Power of David Frye. And I called various Pride centers throughout the United States, telling them to go look at this wonderful video, kind of getting them awareness that this is so important, and having the information and getting people started to have groups national. By doing this, I've already got a group in Kentucky, and the gal that runs their group out there, her name is Betsy, and she has a disability. And she has been telling me that they're getting 8 or 9 people weekly. And I just think that is awesome. And so this is just, you know, she can do it, I can do it, other states can do as follows. There are a few states that do have disability awareness for people with disabilities that are GLBTQ. I think Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, I think has a program, but we really need all the states having this kind of awareness so that people with disabilities that are GLBTQ are not sheltered anymore, and they have a place to go and be themselves. And that's what it's all about. So thank you for watching this wonderful video. Hi, I'm talking today with John Killacky from the Flynn Theater. He's the executive director there at the Flynn Theater. And here's John. And, you know, John, there's so much that with this group and having a disability and not being so isolated. And with your disability and when you were in the hospital and not getting fair treatment for being a gay man and having a disability, I would just want to go over that again, and because it just hurts. It just has a special place in my heart that needs to be addressed.
Well, first, thank you for having me on this. This is very exciting to me, and the advocacy work you've done for queers with disabilities is amazing.
Oh, thank you.
It's really important. You know, for me, it was 22 years ago. I had surgery on a tumor in my spinal cord, and I was told, you'll have a sore neck, you know, for about a month. You'll be in the hospital for 3 days, but things will be good. Well, it didn't, as you know, didn't work out so well. I woke up from surgery after 12 hours, completely quadriplegic, paralyzed from the neck down. And I was in that rehab hospital for 6 weeks after that. And it took me about 3 months to learn how to walk again. So in that process, I was suddenly newly disabled. It was you know, the night before I had run 5 miles, and the next day I was quadriplegic. It was an amazing change. But 22 years ago was a long time ago. There weren't people like you doing this kind of work. And so while the support staff and the medical staff were very helpful and they were welcoming to my husband, it was interesting because we weren't legally married then. So he had to have in his backpack, he had to have our wills. We had to have what my determinations were about care, and he had to carry it every day in case there was an issue, because he wasn't legally recognized as my spouse. So that was number one. And then I remember, I've told you this story, that in the first week they picked me up, they put me in a wheelchair, I'm rolled into the psychologist's office on the floor. And she said, well, what's on your mind? And I said, well, this is kind of new to me. I'm kind of in shock, and I guess I'm interested in if you could give me some input on what the return of sexual function might be for someone who's quadriplegic like me in this. And this is a psychologist working in a ward with people with spinal injuries, brain injuries, and strokes, right? And we're supposed to have a weekly session. She said, well, gee, I don't know. I'm not gay. And I said, well, I didn't ask about you. I'm asking about me, and you're a psychologist in a rehab hospital. And she said, well, I really don't know. I'm sorry. And I said, we're done. She said, well, it's good to be angry. I said, oh, no, we are done. And so I called for the orderly to wheel me back to the chair. I reported her the next day. I refused to meet with her again because it was like, how can you be that ignorant? I mean, how many ways can all of us have sex? There's not very many ways. So it's like, okay, so there was that. And then the night before we went home, I'm again still chair-bound, they put us in a practice apartment on the floor to make sure Larry and I could do things well. And they said, okay, well, we're really sorry. We have a tape for you, a VHS tape to watch, sort of about, you know, sexuality and disability. They said, we're sorry, guys. It's from a heterosexual point of view. And we said, well, that's okay. There's only so many ways one can have sex. So we're interested in this because we're sexual beings and we want to understand this. So the tape was so wrong on every level. Being quadriplegic at that time, I was on a lot of medication for the spasticity. So you don't have alcohol when you're on a lot of this medication. So of course the setup was the guy in the wheelchair and the woman he's with are having a sweet dinner, a romantic dinner, and they're having wine. It's like, okay, well, that's number one wrong, because you can't do that. And then afterwards they roll into the bedroom and she picks him up like he's a little rag doll, and she puts him on the bed very gingerly, and then she gets into bed, rolls, and then she takes and rolls her boyfriend on top of her. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, this is wrong on every level. First, if you don't have sensation in your genital area, and you don't have proprioception, which is location, why are people still defining insertion as the sexual act? So the next day we said to the doctors, toss that tape. You got to toss that tape. And they said, why? And I said, have you watched it? And they admitted they hadn't seen it in a long time. So I said, well, it's medically wrong. And what you have to do is redefine sexuality. You have to start with, where do you feel something? And if I feel something here, that's where you start. If I don't have any sensation here, which I don't, then you can go there, but it's like there's no pleasure in any of that. So it's interesting how you have to redefine it. But the hospital first wasn't used to people talking, frankly, about sex. And then most of the staff had no idea about kind of a gay sexuality, how to integrate that. So as you know, I put a book together, 2004. I had a book called Queer Crips, Disabled Gay Men and Their Stories. And what was important to me about that is that the narrative in disability is that everything, we're happy, we're well adjusted. No matter what our disabilities are, we are there, and look at that happy, well-adjusted person. Well, that's not our lives. We get frustrated, we get depressed, we're suicidal sometimes, and to me it was important to have that, reframe the narrative around disability. And all the disability presses rejected it, because it's like, no, this is not, you're not role models. It's like, no, we're real people struggling with the issues that we have, and they're not easy issues.
No.
So one of the gay presses picked it up, which was great. It won a Lambda Literary Award, which was really great. And the other thing that I think I've learned along this path is that I also am an artist. As you know, you've seen some of my films. And I reached out to other artists with disabilities because I was interested. I needed role models. I needed people to understand. And I went to this meeting in Los Angeles. I was living in San Francisco at the time. And it was talking about disability. And all of these people, all they wanted to do was be actors and in Hollywood. And they kept complaining, saying, well, we don't get to play any parts. And Daniel Day-Lewis comes in and he gets to play My Left Foot and he wins his Oscar for that. But real people with disabilities don't do it. And I was saying, well, who cares about Hollywood? Hollywood marginalizes everybody, stereotypes everybody. So let's create our own images. You know? So it encouraged me then to make more films around it. Again, about our real lives, not this fantasy life that happy, well-adjusted disability people. And so, you know, I've come to your group at the Pride Center and we've talked about these issues. I've showed some of those films. And it's been so important to me to have dialogue with you and people in my community because we share a different experience than other people. And you know, shows like this allow you to really bring it forward into the community, and I'm just grateful for that.
Oh, thanks. You know, by doing this work and being recognized that there's people with all disabilities that really need the support being GLBTQ. I face that we have two whammies, and I've said that before, and we have to live with those having a disability every day and struggling for who we are. And, You know, I remember going to school and being, having such sex education, and nothing back then in the criteria for sex education, there was nothing said about people that are GLBTQ. And I don't know in the criteria today in special ed, but that needs to be changed.
Well, you're so right, and it's even a broader thing that I think society does not see any of us with disabilities as sexual beings. They're so frightened by the disabled body, and that it's like that young kids with different disabilities. The parents are really even kind of sterilizing them. I mean, it's kind of astounding what's happening and how people are not even seen. So if you're going to deny the sexuality as people go into puberty and adulthood, they're going to have sex.
Yeah.
We're all going to have sex in different ways. And so what we need to do is remodel it. We have to talk about it. And, it's essential that we do it from a queer perspective and from a disabled perspective, because those are overlapping, but they're not the same as well. And, then we go into the queer community and there's even more prejudice against those of us with disabilities. And, going into a gay bar in a wheelchair, very difficult. Going in with your cane, people see the wheelchair, they don't see the person. They see the cane, they don't see the person. If someone's deaf and they go in a bar, it's really hard. It's a dark place. It's hard to really be reading lips and stuff. And so sex education's essential for young disabled kids to understand. And parents have to accept that their children are going to be sexual. And so rather than protect them from it, they have to empower them with it. And, I don't know how to do that. I'm not a sex educator, but...
Well, I remember also when we ever talked about sex going to school, I mean, it was, you do not talk about that. Yeah. And
I used to, when I lived in San Francisco, once a year, there were folks getting their doctorate in sex education. And I would go in and I would just sit there and I said, you can ask me any question you want about sex. And they would ask me the most intimate things because no one else was willing to talk about it. I even had, when I just had come home from the hospital, I still had a lot of spasticity. And I remember calling my doctor up and I said, well, I want to ask you kind of something personal, if you don't mind, Marilyn. Marilyn was her name, Marilyn Thompson, great doctor. And she said, no, I kind of like that you and Larry are so direct, so we're all learning from you. And I said, well, when I had an orgasm, the left side of my arm started going into a spasm. And, it's kind of, it frightened me because I couldn't control it, and I don't know what that means. Is that dangerous and stuff? And she said, let me bring it back to the medical team and I'll call you back because I don't know. We're going to have to do some research on this because no one is willing to talk to us as directly like you are. So anyway, we get a call a week later and she said, well, we had a really great conversation about this, John. And all we want to say to you and Larry is next time it happens, just tell Larry to duck. So he doesn't get hit with the flying arm. And I thought, that's the way to have a conversation. You go to your doctor and say, well, this is happening. Is this okay? And then they take us seriously. And they come back and they think about it. And then they say, go for it. And, so to me, that kind of thing, that sex positive conversation is so important.
Hi, I'd like to talk to you today that I think, what I think is very important, and for people with disabilities that are GLBTQ, and the phrases for GLBTQ means gay, lesbian, bi, trans, and questioning. For people with disabilities, I hope you could watch this and really get a good feeling that, you know, there is support out there now, well, in Vermont. And I hope that with my work, and I can get it round to United States, that this is such an important work that I do here in the state of Vermont, and I hope that other people will follow. Also, for now, I guess I need to talk to case management, home providers, parents. If you have a loved one that's got a disability, that is gay, lesbian, bi, or trans, or questioning, please go to your nearest gay and lesbian community center and see if they've got like a place for people with disabilities to go and talk about their everyday supports around being GLBTQ.
Okay, so you know this cables that you're doing is really interesting to me, but now you tell me you're also doing it in Kentucky. So how's that working? Like, what are you going to be doing in Kentucky at the same time?
Well, so what I did was, I have this small video that's on Netflix that I made through Green Mountain Self Advocates, and they did a lot of the editing from it. Champlain College started the filming, and then they never finished it, so I got the film. And then what Green Mountain Self Advocates did is they took some of the filming and did some live interviewing with me, and we made a small video on YouTube, and it's called The Power of David Frye. And so really what it shows is what we talk about in groups, what are the topics that we talk about, how to start a group, and it's really important for having that transitioning of having a disability and being GLBTQ. And then from having other states, so what I'll do is I'll take a United States map, and then I will look up different Pride centers in the United States, and then I'll give them a call and just say, I have this wonderful video that I'd like to have you go and watch. And I hope that you get something out of it, that, you know, this is important, that you need to have part of your center. And if you have any questions or want to get a hold of me about how to start a group, please do.
Beautiful.
So,
now, how long have you been doing the group here in Vermont?
I have been doing the group here at Pride Center for a good 8 years.
And how'd you start it? Like,
I went to a national conference for people with disabilities, and I went to a relationship workshop, and there was hardly anything said in the workshop about people with disabilities that are GLBTQ. So as I was flying back from Minnesota to Vermont, I said, I'm going to call the center, and I want to get this going. And that's when the blossom started to blossom. I mean, and that's when people had said, you know, this is really important. It's important to see people be out of shelter and being recognized that, you know, we have a disability, we're gay, GLBTQ, and we need the support.
Yeah. You know, the ableism in the queer community is still, like you said, you went to that conference. I remember going to a conference with artists, and there was, people were doing little bits of what they were performing, and the this one comedian rolled out, she's quadriplegic, and she starts attacking Siegfried and Roy, the two guys who were in Las Vegas with the white tigers, and they were just big old queens, Siegfried and Roy. But she was attacking them and really in a homophobic way. And afterwards, I went up to her and I said, I cannot believe that you actually would do this in such a homophobic way. And I thought, isn't this interesting? Even in a disability conference, the other is still made fun of. And in that situation, we were the other. And it was like, no, you got to have a little more sensitivity than that, and a little more nuance in your comedy.
Right.
And so at that point, I actually went back and I made a film called Crip Shots with queer artists with disabilities, because I really wanted to promote that there's multi-layers in all of this. There's a lot of nuance and complexity in this, and it's important that we engender and we give role models. And that's what I think is important in your work here, is that you're providing role models and community. Like, people can gather at the Pride Center with each other. They can learn from each other, because I'm paraplegic. I walk with a cane. That's different than your disability, as different than other people's disabilities. So we are not the same, but we can learn from each other about those nuances, and that's really essential. And that's what I think this whole show's going to be about for you, is upcoming with Eli Clare. That's a whole different set of things that he brings forward, and it's magnificent. I love Eli's work as an artist as well.
Yeah.
So thank you for doing this great work.
Thank you.
And I love you for it. Thank you. Okay.
What a great conversation. So, John, the exposition that I went to at, up to the college, Champlain College. It was such a great, because I had seen the videos, and I've seen them before, but it really shines a light on our disabilities and the work that you've done. It's just incredible.
Thank you, and it was so great you were there. I was thrilled. Thank you, and it was great. Champlain College Art Gallery had it up for a month. It's called Embodied Voice. It was 8 of my videos, my agitprop videos, and it gave me a chance to look at the body of work of over 25 years. So in the 90s, I was making AIDS-related videos because so many of our friends were dying. I had to find a way to commemorate, to grieve, to mourn, to survive, to find hope. And the body was so reviled then. People with AIDS were shunned by the medical establishment, by their families. We were doing caregiving circles. And so I wanted to make the body sacred again. So in those pieces, I myself am nude in some pieces, and I have this one scene where there's 18 of us who are just laying down nude in this field of bodies and bones, as I talked about losses. So there were 3 AIDS-related ones, and then 3 of my disability-related ones were there. And one that I really loved is called Dreaming Awake, and I worked with a mixed ability dance company out of San Francisco. They were the Axis Dance Company. But I said to them, let's be nude, and let's not use our apparatus. So if you're in a wheelchair, you're not going to dance in your wheelchair. If you have a cane, no cane, and we're all going to be nude. And what we did is once a week we got together, they improvised, and I filmed them. And it was, I shot it in black and white because the bodies were so beautiful. And people were carrying each other, holding each other, rolling, lifting and stuff. And afterwards, people said to me, well, there weren't many people with disabilities there, right? And I said, no, because you're defining someone with a disability when you see their chair, and you're not seeing that person. You're not seeing that person in it. And so to me, to have the AIDS pieces with the bodies and then the disability pieces with the bodies in this gallery exhibit, it was to really celebrate the body is so important.
Yeah. And
I think in disability culture, we have to celebrate our bodies, and we have to celebrate each other's bodies in a very different way. I mean, in a body electric way is really important. And so I was glad Champlain College gave me that opportunity. You know, there was like do we have to do trigger warnings in this exhibition for people? We thought, nah. So we just did, please note there's nudity, and it was fantastic. I worked with screenwriting classes, rhetoric of community writing classes, and people were really interested in the work and also interested in encountering the body, the disabled body. And they said, well, we've actually never seen anyone who was an amputee before, unclothed.
Wow.
We didn't see someone with a prosthetic leg, and it was so empowering for them to say, oh, maybe I have to see people differently now. And so it was great that I had that opportunity to do that, and it was great you came to see it. Thank you.
And that brings up, like you had said earlier, that everybody has a different disability. It's not just a broken limb or somebody's in a chair, somebody's in a cane. I mean, my disability is a learning disability. So that's something that you may not see, but down the road, if you're with me, talking with me, you see that disability in a different form. And there's so many of us that, like you had said, there's just so many different varieties of different disabilities.
Yes, and we aren't experts in each other's. We only can live what we have. And at the Flynn Center that I'm the executive director of, we decided we were going to really work to make some of our programs more inclusive for people on the autism spectrum. And it was a huge learning curve for all of us because we had to encounter our own stereotypes of people who are nonverbal. We had to encounter our own fears of people who are acting not like people are used to acting in the theater. And we had to learn. We had to learn from families with kids on the autism spectrum. We had an advisory board of people on the spectrum. And we also worked with some of our artists to adapt to make them more sensory friendly. So it's pretty easy, and it's like you put the lights up a little bit, you leave the doors to the lobby open, you have noise canceling headphones or fidgets if people want those. If people want to walk up and down the aisle, it's okay. And the artists know that, well, if someone's going to talk a little bit or make sounds, that doesn't mean they're not engaged. They may not be laughing or clapping in the same way that others might do it, but they are in the theater and they are in relation to the theater and they're engaged in a different way. And so they may not laugh at the laugh line, but they may cheer at a different point. And a number of our artists are doing this with us now, and we have coloring tables in the lobby. And what we found out is that basically we just have to create a situation of welcoming. And those adaptations have now transformed our family matinees. We do it for everything now. And it's like everybody's bringing their toddlers and they're having fun at the Flynn. And you don't have to sit there quietly. You can actually be exuberant if you want to be exuberant. And it's okay. No one's going to tell you to shut up. And so it's changed the way we're doing business. But we had to learn. We had to learn about that because I was ignorant. Yeah. And I was afraid. And I didn't want to make a mistake. I didn't want to do something wrong. And we also had to learn that if a family was walking in and one of their kids is on the spectrum and they're nonverbal, you don't look at the dad and say, how's he doing? You look at the kid and say, hi, how are you? How are you? How are you doing? We don't ignore the person.
Right.
And that happens a lot, not only just in this, but sometimes when I use my wheelchair when we go out with my husband and I'll be rolling, he'll be walking, and we'll run into friends, and they literally would say to Larry, how's John? As I'm sitting there in the wheelchair, like, hello! So it's an interesting thing that we're pretty invisible in society, and thank you for doing this great work.
Oh, thank you. And I think that's it with John Killacky. And So this is just Prideability, this program, this networking, and there's going to be other interviewers with different other disabilities that you will see that, you know, autistic, and there's just all kinds of different disabilities. So thank you for coming to the show today.
And have me back.
And have you back.
Okay, very good. Thank you.